I was reading through the college catalog of some junior college around where I'm at, and as I read through it, I realized that they offered high school classes, and I was kind of interested about this, and so I called some advisor lady from the JC, and asked her if you could go to high school through the junior college, and she said no, that you could only take classes at the JC that you honestly couldn't get into at high school, and you had to prove to them that you couldn't get into those classes at the high school or whatever. And because I was thinking about this, and I'm not sure if this is correct, but this probably isn't too far off. I remember that in high school you need to take like 4 years of English and history, 2 years of math, and 2 years of electives, and like 3 years of science. This is what I remember. I don't know if this is true or not, but it's something like that. Now, what you could do is you could take English, history, and science in semester 1 at the JC, English during January, English, history, and math in semester 2, English and history during the summer, history, science, and an elective during semester 3, an elective during the next January, and science and math during semester 4. And if you do this, you will be done in high school. You will be done with high school in 2 years, and having in all likelihood gone through a lot less crap. Now, why the hell would the state education system want everyone to spend 4 years in school instead of 2? Well, just keep in mind that the principle that organizations will fight to survive and grow. And normally the only way to do this is to provide high quality services cheaply and just beat your competitions that way. That's how you survive and grow. Now, if you have a state, you can just buy laws to prohibit competition. And so even if you are a private school, you still have to follow some state curriculum that is for sure on a 4-year plan. So this whole thing about high school being done in 2 years won't happen until the people who are invested in the 4-year system no longer have the power to stop it. Okay, the reason you had to go to high school for 4 years instead of 2 and deal with all sorts of crap like mandatory rallies and bathroom passes is because the people who make money off of it have successfully lobbied for laws. And of course, laws are enforced by seizing assets, which at the end of the day are enforced with a gun. So you're forced to, do the whole 2-year thing and all the inefficiencies because of guns, all right? Now, perhaps you think the 4-year system is a good thing. Perhaps you think it's good that some 35-year-old mouth breather can tell me when I can pee, and that's part of some high school experience. Fine. Let's say that everyone should go to high school for 4 years. Okay, let's just say that. Everyone should go to high school for 4 years. I also think that everyone should eat their vegetables. That doesn't mean you are justified in making a law to that effect. Okay? But the broader point is that any reform of the education system will be exceedingly difficult because the people who make a living are wedded to the current system, and they will use whatever apparatuses, be they local, state, or federal laws, to fight any effort to allow choice or efficiency, anything that shrinks their organization. Another dimension to this is that the average tuition for private schools is $3,116 versus $6,587 for public schools. Now, private schools are, of course, hogtied to state curriculums, so while you can see pretty big leaps in efficiency, there's only so much you can do to make the existing 4-year system better. Private schools are a little bit more than twice as efficient than public schools, but they're still constrained by the public rules. So it is really not that much of a leap at all to assume that a pure private education system would be less than 1/4 the cost of the public school system, given that it would only take 2 years. Also, keep in mind that you still pay taxes even if you send your child to a private school under the current system, and so private schools tend to be more upper class than public schools, and thus, if you did away with public schools completely, you would most likely see the per year private school tuition be less than $3,116, along with the school only being 2 years long. And the reason the private school tuition would go down is because you have lower income people sending their kids to private schools. And so the reason public schools are so crappy is because they're public. Okay, being public is the only way that extreme crappiness can survive in the long run. They have guns to secure their position, and you are forced to pay for it even if you don't want it, and you must send your children to it, and only if you are wealthy can you afford to send your children to private schools. Now, the private schools are actually cheaper and better than the public schools, but it's more expensive to send your kids to private schools because you are paying for the public schools even if you aren't using them. Okay, and that's, how sick is that? And of course, the arguments that apply to high school will also apply to college. Without a state, it is my opinion that the four-year colleges will no longer be the norm, but actually an exception for the very wealthy, and perhaps not even for the very wealthy. This is because only universities with state funding can compete with each other anymore, and thus the state can decide to pull accreditation and funding from any school at once. And through this funding, it basically controls the university system. If a university just up and said, fuck all this general education bullshit, we'll let you get a degree in 2 years. Okay, they would immediately lose their state funding, and of course half of their staff would have to be fired, and they wouldn't receive as much in tuition because kids are only coming in for 2 years, although they would probably be able to charge more per year. So even if they could pull this off, okay, even if they could transition to a 2-year school, why would they want to? Okay, so that their staff and student body could be half the size, okay, so that they could have a smaller profit margin as a result of having no state funding, So this whole state funding thing and really screws things up. But just imagine having kids being done with high school by age 16. And then we'll have 2 years to either go to college or, get ready for college or whatever, take whatever classes they need. And if they go to college, they'll only have to go for 2 years. And if they want to do the whole 4-year thing, fine, they can do the whole 4-year thing. But they only have to go for 2 years. They can be done when they're 18. And, really smart kids could routinely graduate by 17 because they could go to high school when they're 13 or whatever. I mean, this is all this stuff is actually kind of exciting to me, and of course it fills teachers with the horrors. And when you say this, it's a real sickening sight to see teachers. They look away and then they look down in their hands. They're fiddling something, maybe with keys, trying to look busy, and then smiling with that irritated smile, saying, "Yeah, okay, whatever." It's like a smile that kind of, they're smug and superior, like, yeah, they've heard this all before, but they're just justifying their own corny ass. And they'll say to these kinds of things, oh no, having an entire year, 5 days a week, does a better job at teaching statistics than college. Therefore, you need to keep the current high school system. And if someone says something like that, I'll say, okay, I'm sure spending an entire year, 5 days a week, teaching statistics is better than, 3 days a week in college. And if an entire year of statistics is the optimal amount of time that a psych major should spend on it, then the market will figure that out. And even if people should spend an entire year on statistics, that still doesn't give you the right to force them so. Which brings us to the next topic, the underclass. Given that a pure private high school experience will cost less than a quarter of the public experience, it's nearly impossible that the underclass will in net suffer. And the reason is that poor people are paying for public education anyway, even if they pay zero taxes, okay, because their employer pays taxes. And the cost of schools get taken out of the paycheck. And any tax increase results in a mixture of lower profits for the employer and lower wages. All right, based on how much either person can bear. And if you want to understand how exactly this works, you need to take economics. The employer will pay some of the tax with his profits, and some of the tax will come from wage cuts. And finally, even if the poor were somehow saddled with 100% of the cost of education now, high school is now only 2 years and about $10,000 if you factor in all sorts of miscellaneous expenses. Compared to the public system, the poor kid now has 2 years to earn $10,000 plus interest. If he can do so, then the moment he has paid off the debt is the moment that the poor family has achieved all the net benefit that the state education would have provided. And probably more, because now the kid has work experience and can earn higher wages because of it, and they probably receive some charity or financial aid, and the fact that there are no school taxes means that wages are higher. Okay? I mean, it's a real avalanche of positives when you remove the state.